And I just started the recording. And definitely, Dan, thank you very much for presenting tonight. With these two user groups, the Boston one and North Boston Azure, Dan used to attend mine all the time, and he would attend Bill's often, but he was usually at mine. He was one of the regulars. Back when we met in person, and he was always helping with Global Azure Bootcamp. And I just remember he did a couple of VM talks at the Azure Bootcamp that it was just spilling over. They were so popular. So Dan's definitely one of the presenters that we've had at the group several times, often with infrastructure related stuff like this evening. But Dan knows a lot more than just infrastructure talk. So definitely, thanks for speaking tonight, Dan. I'll let you take it over from here.
My pleasure. And so I'm going to try to stream this through the camera. So you should be able to. I believe when I talk, it should just automatically be center stage. Is everybody able to see that?
I see the picture of the room in Burlington, I think. Yep.
All right, so I'll give it a try. We'll see what happens. So again, welcome to the combined Boston, North Boston Azure user group. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here. I can't wait till we can meet in person again. I really enjoyed that. My name's Dan Colon. I also, with UDI, I help him out at the New Hampshire Cloud User Group. And next week, I'll be presenting on Azure Centennial. And the name doesn't really reflect exactly what Azure Centennial is because I'm limited to 80 characters, but basically it's security information event management and security orchestration automated response solution. Basically, you have security events that you can automatically respond to, and that's basically Azure Centennial. So Phil, welcome to join me and Udai next week, April 20th. We're going to cap it at 10,000 people, so sign up quickly. And today we're going to cover Arc enabling management of hybrid and multi-cloud K8s solutions. So let's jump into the agenda. And we'll first go over Azure Arc. What is it? How does it allow us to manage infrastructure in a multi-cloud on-prem environment? Then we'll look at registering or onboarding a Kubernetes cluster into Azure Arc. In fact, that's the specific area we'll be focusing on today. We'll move to GitOps, which is a framework for automating continuous deployment and declarative infrastructure using Git as a single source of truth. So basically, you can submit a change to your Git repository and then have it automatically deployed into Kubernetes. It's really cool. With policies, you'll be able to enforce organizational standards and assess compliance, such as one thing I've always used it for is I enforce every resource must have a tag with an owner applied to it. So if I come to something like, well, who's running this? I don't want to delete anything on anybody. So I find that very useful. And last but not least, we'll look at monitoring, where you can have alert and notifications based on Kubernetes telemetrics. So Azure Arc, well, it's a management tool and allows you to do on-prem and multi-cloud. it's a single pane of glass for managing all your infrastructure. So if we see right here in the left, I'll turn on my little pin. We'll see how this works. This right here, see how well I can draw a circle. You can manage servers in different cloud environments, Kubernetes clusters, SQL Server, Azure Stack, hyperconvergent infrastructure. Specifically, we're going to look at Kubernetes clusters today. And this is sort of an overview of Azure Arc. So we have Azure Arc here. And if I look at the slide before, we'll see this symbol here, Azure Arc. And the reason why I'm showing that is this used to confuse me as I navigated between the blades, like what's this, and it's so I hope to make that clear for you. So Azure Arc, you can manage many different types of infrastructure, and specifically we're going to look at the Kubernetes. So you'll see this symbol here. But using Azure Arc, we can manage, on-prem Kubernetes. We can manage like EKS, GKE, or any CNCF compliant Kubernetes cluster. And some of the use cases for this is, I like to really point out this last one. It helps prevent, didn't mean to draw on top of that. Helps prevent vendor lockout or lock-in. Basically, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of AWS and Polar, where Polar was giving a day or two notice before they were not allowed to use the AWS platform anymore. And I'm not sure if they ever recovered from that, but I know they were immediately down because they were very well tied into AWS. So this is why I'm specifically focusing on Kubernetes with Azure Arc today, because with a container, you can very easily move that from one Kubernetes cluster to another. So if you have Kubernetes clusters in different clouds, you can very easily move that workload from one cloud to another to help prevent this. Because, I mean, we used to be told, the cloud, high availability, resiliency. Well, what happens if they're not going to let you use their platform and give you 0 to no notice? So I think this is something organizations have to start to look at. So I'm going to do just a very quick overview of Kubernetes. So basically, Kubernetes is a container orchestration, which means it helps orchestrate scaling up, scaling down, deployment of containers. Containers will house your applications. And when we speak of like EKS, AKS, or GKE, of all the major vendors, their managed Kubernetes platform. Basically, they're managing the master node for you, so you can just concentrate on the worker nodes. And nodes are similar to or synonymous with VMs. So this cluster would have 6 VMs assigned to it. And the advantage of that is it gives you a higher density of resource utilization versus just a regular VM. It's also other advantages is, auto scaling and loosely coupled infrastructure. So that's why there's a big initiative out there to use Kubernetes, because now developers can just put it in a container, hand it off to operations, and then they deploy it. So it runs as it was developed, tested, and then in production. So it isolates all. You bring all the dependencies with it within the container. And we're not really going to dive deep into Kubernetes, but I'm going to show how easy it is to set up a cluster in Azure, because in order to provision a cluster in Azure Arc, you have to have one that exists. So we'll jump into that now. And we'll see how the screen increases. Yep. So I'm already logged into the Azure portal. I'm going to create a resource. I'm giving it a second for my computer to respond. I'll just try to, oops, I got impatient, hit refresh. So now we gotta wait a few more seconds. And of course, the Azure portal is usually much faster. I'm just running a lot of things on a very old laptop. And I'll just give it a second because I will need the portal to show the rest of the demo. So even if we don't bother creating a cluster, we still want to see the portal. And we're almost there. So this shows me, you know, maybe I'll do, a lot of times I'll do screenshots ahead of time. And so this is definitely a case where I wish I had done that. All right, we are almost there. All right, so I've clicked on create a resource. I'm going to type in Kubernetes. And I've hit enter, and it'll give me some choices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue with the presentation, and when the screen comes available, we'll jump right back to it. All right, so we're going on the assumption I've created a Kubernetes cluster, in this case, a k8s. I've also, well, we'll see when the screen comes available for us. But some of the prereqs are we must have the Azure CLI version 2.15. So let's take a look at that. So I can just type AZ version to see the version I have. I'll give this a few more seconds. If this doesn't work, what I'll do is I'll turn off the fancy circle and just go to a PowerPoint presentation. I was hoping for a new computer for Christmas, but I got a lump of coal, so it's just unfortunate.
I think that's what we all got this year.
Yes. I was told to stay inside for a whole year. They haven't let me out yet. I don't know why. All right, the marketplace has actually presented itself. So while we're waiting for this demo to return, we're going to go to the other demo. All right, so again, I'm in the Azure portal. I'm looking for Kubernetes, and I see it here, Kubernetes service. So I click on this. And all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just 2 minutes to turn off the this video. So my screen will go blank, and then I'll be there in 2 minutes. So I'm going to say, oh, well, okay, maybe things are speeding up. So I'll say create. All right. So just bear with me for 2 minutes. Stop the virtual camera. And now I'm going to share my desktop. Oh, thanks for the feedback on the video quality. So now that I'll be sharing the desktop, I won't be streaming a video, so I'm hoping that will improve things. And screen 2. Okay, well, I'm waiting for that to take control. I have a backup plan too. Let's see.
Woohoo! I can see it.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Let's see how this goes. All right, so I'm creating my Kubernetes cluster, and basically the minimum that's required is I have a resource group. So I'm going to just choose an existing resource group. I'm going to choose AKS-RG, just me saying Azure Kubernetes Service resource group. And then I have to give it a unique name. So I'm going to call this my AKS cluster. And when you're doing tests and all, you know, sometimes every node is related to a VM. So instead of 3, you know, obviously production you want like 3 at the minimum, but if you're just doing testing or whatever, maybe 1. You can also change the node size or VM size so it costs you less money. I have tried micro VMs, but then I always run into problems of not having enough resources to run the application. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. You go too small and you're going to end up using time anyway. And so really that's all that's needed to provide, and then review and create. And then once we do that, in this case, I'm not going to create it because I already have. We'll have a AKS cluster. So as we continue, I'll go back to that screen to show you the cluster that was created. We're now going to continue with the prereqs. And so version 2.15 is required. I have 2.19, so I'm good. However, if you were below that or you just wanted to upgrade, you can just type AZ upgrade. And basically it's in preview, so you may not want to do it for production. But then it'll ask me if I want to upgrade. I'm not going to upgrade because, I ran this demo with 2.19, so why take a chance? And no sense in you watching my machine getting updated. So I had the required Azure CLI. The next thing we need to do is register our namespaces. So I'm just typing AZ provider -H, or you can type --8 help to get the help for this. And there's only like 4 different commands for it, like AZ provider register is one, AZ provider list is another, show unregister. So if you haven't done it before, and there's actually no harm in running it twice, you'll run AZ provider register -- namespace Microsoft.Kubernetes. Then you can run the next line for Microsoft.Kubernetes configuration. But before you go to the next step, you want to make sure it's actually registered, because it does take a few minutes. So for that, you just type AZ provider show namespace, and then the one that we're interested in. And I'm going to change the output to table so it's easier to see versus JSON. And this will show if this namespace has been registered, if it is registering, or if it's unregistered. So after you run the register command and you run the show command, it will say registering. And so you just want to, keep running this until it says registered, or just wait an hour and then you'll be fine anyway. Once it's registered, then you're good to go to the next step. So I've already registered these, both namespaces, but this is a very easy step that's required. Now, when we have we'll look at our Kubernetes cluster. And this is the one I created in AKS. Ignore the other symbols you'll see there. We will get to that. So I had this AKS cluster that already exists. And what I would need to do now is to make sure I connect to it using kubectl, which is basically allows you to talk to the cluster. The Kubernetes utility allowing you to talk to the cluster. So we're going to actually dive into a little bit about that, because I think that's important, being able to jump around from one cloud to the next. So let's see where I like to go here. We'll say, and there's no harm in running this command more than once. So the name it wants is the name of the cluster. The name of the resource group. should I call it? AKS-RG. And so what we'll see is this will come back in and go, it's merged. I forget the exact message, but we'll see that in a second. And basically what it's doing is editing this file right here, this config file. I'm going to go to the next screen. And bring back my folder here. So the file location that the kubectl uses, a config file location, is your home directory .cube and its config. So my home directory is c/user/Daniel Cologne /.cube config. And then we turn the append. That's fine. So I'm going to open this up in Notepad, which I already have it open. All right, so I have a typo, no big deal. That's probably also why it took longer. But anyway, it automatically fills this up. In this file, I could come here and just delete it. Let's say we're not sure what's there. So I'm going to run this again with an extra E. And we'll see it'll create the config file, and then we'll see it'll have the information that's needed by kubectl to connect to the my AKS cluster. And let me know if the video, if the sound quality is bad or the video's bad. I'll keep a lookout for that. All right, so here's the message. Merge my AKS cluster as current context. So this is important, current context, and we'll take a look at that. My AKS cluster. So let's drag it back here so we get the right text. And we'll see, obviously you don't want to show this to people, but there you go. This will be deleted afterwards anyway. Here's my cluster, my AKS cluster. And there is a current context, my AK cluster. So I want to show you this for a specific reason. So now we got the AKS cluster. We can communicate with it. I can just type kubectl get nodes. That's probably one of the most common. Tell me about the nodes. And then I'll go out there and that'll return that. And so why it's doing that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the information for AWS. So I also have in EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service cluster setup. I'm going to open a second. Well, actually, that won't work. So one thing that I've done is even if you open up a second command prompt, it's still the same session, and you can only using kubectl this way. I'm sure there might be another way. You're only going to be able to talk to one cluster at a time because it's using one config file. You can actually specify which config file to use, and then you'll be able to talk to more than one. But here we see AKS, so I know I'm talking to that. Now I'm going to get the information for the EKS. I just happen to call this my EKS cluster. Now, another thing that's also important is sometimes you have to specify the region. I don't have it here, but I happen to know to type that in. Let me see if I have the information on the next slide. Nope. Maybe the slide before. Well, so I mean, basically, so if it's your default region, you're good to go. If it's not, then it's not going to find it unless you specify the region it's in. And I forget the region name, so I'll do a quick lookup, or we'll just take a guess. I think it's US East. One. Before I type that, I'll Google it real quick. I could log into it, but I thought just Googling it would be faster. Okay, so I got the format right. That's really what I was worried about. US East 1, I'm pretty sure now, so I'll hit enter. And then we'll take a look at the config file. And what I want you to notice is right now this is my k8s cluster, but I'm actually changing it. It's going to add and change the current context at the same time to my ek8s cluster. But AWS uses a much longer name, and you'll see that. All right, so I typed something wrong, no big deal. So what we'll do is we'll assume I added that, and I probably have a backup somewhere. Just so you don't have to see me labor through it. So I'm going to open up a backup of the config file. Maybe it's this one, it doesn't really matter. But this obviously has a lot more information for different clusters. And what we're looking for is the current context. And oh, this is an older file. Yeah, I've done it a lot of times. So anyway, you'll see that, you know, you can have one, it could point to one current context. And I actually have the commands. Oh, here they are. So right now, I only have one Kubernetes cluster registered in there, but we'll get the idea. So I can say, so this is just going to the config file and listing everything. And the one that is current is going to have an asterisk to it. And if I wanted to switch it, I don't have to, after I've run this command once, I don't have to run it again. I can just say cube ctl config use -context, the context name. So then you can switch it that way. Either way will work. And then what you want to do is make sure you can talk to it. So you can type cube ctl get nodes. And the reason is, so now that we know we can communicate with it, then we will actually register or onboard that cluster. And we would do that with this command at the bottom, connect k8s to Azure Arc. So it's going to be az connect k8s connect the name of the cluster. So if I was doing EKS, it'd be my EKS cluster. And then this resource group is going to be the resource group where Azure Arc is. So in this case, I called it Arc-RG. And there was nothing special about that resource group. I literally just created a blank resource group called Arc-RG. So that was, there's no special setup there. So we take a closer look at this AZ Connect k8s. You can connect, you can delete them, you can list them. Let's go ahead and list them. So because I've already registered everything. And so this is going to give a list of 3 different clusters, one in Azure, one in AWS, and one in Google. I can very easily delete it, so I'm no longer managing it in Azure. I can add it back. I can just I would type the command before that. The connect command, so that's easy enough to add, and that's literally all you do to register it. So just a quick recap, because I know it jumped around a little bit, is make sure you have the current version or higher. I mean, you have the minimum version or higher. You register your namespaces. You can talk to the cluster using kubectl. So we're gonna, get the credentials basically in the kube config, and then you're gonna run a command to make sure you can talk to it. In this case, I put kubectl get knows, but it could be anything. And then we're going to connect. And that is all there is to it. Sometimes it takes a minute or 2, but usually it's pretty quick. So in that case, we registered those. So let's take a look at what that looks like. This was from before we created in a AKS cluster. One thing to note is, I'm not sure if I already said this because I practiced it once or twice, but you don't gain anything by registering the AKS cluster with Azure Arc because you already have everything available to you within Azure. But it's very easy to set up, very easy to try out. So that helps. So I'm going to Azure Arc, and I'm just going this way to show you the navigation. And so here's Kubernetes clusters. So I could have gone directly there. I created shortcuts on the left. And what we are about to see is a view that you would see after you register. So literally after I run that connect command, it's listed here, and that's what you see. And you can see these are at slightly different versions. And I mean, they can be completely different versions, but they're fairly, I try to get ones that are close together for no particular reason. And so now we've onboarded clusters from multiple clouds. And the step is the same as on-prem. As long as the Kubernetes cluster is a CNCF compliant, we're good to go. All right, so now we're going to look at GetOps. And basically, this will allow us to deploy from Get straight to Kubernetes. So I got a very simple demo. I'm trying to keep things very simple. And you'll see how easy it is, actually. So what's get is going to be your single source of truth for the entire system. So these are the get principles. These are some practices. Ensure you test, have at least 2 repos per app, 1 app for source code and second for the manifest files. Have a plan for your secrets management. You obviously don't want to store any secrets in a version control system. This is just a list of all the different technologies with the definitions. I thought at least this was helpful to me. I'm not going to go through them, but it's amazing all the different technologies that are behind the scenes somewhere for something. If you're wondering what this green circle is, that would be where I would appear. So, yeah. So I talk about Helm a little bit, but I'm going to just sort of go through this quickly, and we'll go to actually Get itself. I mean, using GitOps. You don't even need to know anything about Flux, but don't confuse it with the Flux capacitor from Back to the Future. All right, so we're going to go directly to the demo. And I'm going to go to my k8s cluster. And so now, Azure Arc, Kubernetes cluster. Now I'm looking at the specific cluster, and I see GitOps here. We'll see I already have something configured. So I'm just going to click here real quick, and we'll actually set one up. So I'm opening up the configuration. We see this URL right here, so I'm just going to copy this. So we're going to sort of go backwards. Oh, cool. Well, I'll just click. So this is a repository that I forked. So we'll go back even one more step once it appears. And this is forked from Azure/arc-k8s demo. So this is a public repository. And I'll point out a few things here. You can actually deploy directly from here. The problem is just, like any repository, you're not allowed to make changes here. So you can deploy from it, but then we wouldn't be able to do the next step, and that's make a change. So if you fork it, which I've already done, you'll get a copy of it in your own repository. And then we can deploy from this URL, and then we can make a change and then see that it's automatically deployed. So I would copy this URL, and I'm going to go to one of these other clusters where I probably don't have it set up. Oh, great. Okay, so now I'll say add configuration. And I'm going to scroll towards the bottom first. I'm going to say public. You can do private, but then you have all the security stuff. So we're just, for the demo, we're doing a public repository, right? I mean, it's readily available. I'm pasting the URL in here. I'm going to give it a name, and just to make sure I don't run into any unknown errors, we're just going to use the same name. So I'm going to one that I've already entered the information. We're going to copy it over. And I'll move this just off the screen so I can copy and paste. Or maybe it's probably better we see it, right? So this one was called Arc k8s-demo, same name as the repo, and the operator instance and namespace is called cluster-config, and the operator scope is called cluster. So I just want to use all of the same stuff. Namespaces are a great way to logically separate resources in your cluster. Let's say it's using Helm charts. So I'm going to say enable Helm. If I wanted any other parameters, I would just enter them here. In this case, we don't need any. So this is a very simple example. So I gave it a name, which really can be anything. I believe the cluster config is in the Helm chart, so we needed to use that. And I made it a public because I didn't want to bother with setting up. Well, it's a public repository anyway, but if you're going from your own private repository, you have to set up the keys and all. I'm going to click Add. And now we'll see that the operation is pending. And it could take a few minutes. It can take 30 minutes, who knows. But once it's done, we'll see what it looks like. So it's saying pending. So I'm going to go to one where I've already configured this. And this now says installed. We'll give ourselves a little more room here. And so this would have taken that, it deployed from GitHub. This repository has been deployed into the cluster. So just to make it a little faster, we'll look that up real quick. I'm already connected to the my AKS cluster, so I can just say get service. I can also find this through the portal. I just happen to know this might be a little faster. And this is, some of y'all may have seen the Azure vote before, but this is basically, this is that application. So I got my external IP address. For proof in the pudding. And there's our application. So you can vote for cats, dogs, you can reset the count, whatever you want. So in this specific, we're going to dive into this a little bit more. But what I wanted to show you also is, let's say, oh, good. Didn't think my memory worked that well. Anyway, here's some namespaces: team-A, team-B, team-C. So let's go back to the repository. And under here, namespaces. And here's team A, team B, team C. So it looks fairly easy if I wanted to make a change to add a new namespace. Shouldn't be too hard. So We'll just open this up. I'm going to copy this. Go back to the folder. I'm going to add a file. Create new file. team-d.yaml. Obviously, I mean, you can do this locally and then you commit it, or you can do it right in GitHub and make the commit. So that's what I'm doing. And this is going to be a D. And then created, I mean, that's fine. So I'm going to commit new file. All right, so now I've made another change. So you would have checks and balances. Somebody would have to review this before it automatically got submitted. But let's say all that got done, and now I've just submitted. Now, what would you have to do to get that out to your cluster? Well, the answer is absolutely nothing. It will, I apologize, I forget the polling frequency, but it automatically polls for changes. And it will automatically deploy that new namespace. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it may take a while. Let's see if we get lucky. Oh yeah, that was actually very quick. So it's done. It's been deployed. So in theory, I can have all these clusters in different clouds pointed to the same repository. So when I make a change, I've automatically deployed to all those clusters in different clouds. I think that's pretty cool. So one thing to note is, I believe if I was to remove Team D, it doesn't automatically remove it in the cluster, because then it might destroy some applications that depend on that namespace. So that's a nuance to think of. But if I was making a code change, that would have been fine. So that's basically GetOps. GetOps. Oh, here's the poll. So if you delete the configuration, it'll happen within 10 minutes. And then here's I talk about the namespace gets deleted. They are left intact in order to avoid breaking other workloads. So you can use kubectl to delete the namespace if needed to. All right, so those are actually the nuances I was just alluding to. Oh, last but not least, monitoring. So we got insights, alerts, metrics, log, workbooks. Let's take a look at that. So configuring this is actually quite easy. So let's go to my EKS cluster. I'm going to click on Insights. And we'll give it a few seconds. So basically, configure Azure Monitor. I just click on a button. It's going to ask me for a log analytics workspace. So if you don't have one, you'll have to create one, but that's fairly easy. Just create a new resource, go to log analytics, create a unique name for it. I'm just going to use an existing one called Arc Monitoring Law for log analytics workspace. I'll say configure. And this could take a while. So what I mean by a while is, I guess like here it says 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So I already have it done for the my k8s cluster, but as you see, it's literally just clicking on a button and say go for it. I'm just going to close 1 or 2 tabs to increase the resources for the computer. And here we see node utilization. So I guess it's around 11%. The memory utilization, 20+%. Node count, I only have 1 on the my k8s cluster. We can obviously change the time range. We can look at reports. And we can get disk capacity. We can find things of data usage. We can look at the nodes. And this is, I know it's taking a little bit to come up. It comes up much faster when you're not presenting. We look at controllers, containers, and then if I go to alerts, I won't go through the steps, but basically I can create a new alert rule. So you specify the metric and the value you want it to trigger off of, and then what you want done, maybe send an email. We got metrics. Total number of CPUs. Won't be too exciting, it'll be 1. Oh, 6. Oh, okay. You look at into your pods, containers. Let's do containers. So you can choose different metrics here. This one doesn't look like it has anything exciting there. We got logs. So what we could do for this is we look up Kubernetes specific stuff. Let's see, I can say load to editor. These are predefined queries. You can write your own, but it's nice to start off with something and then you change around. This is using KQL. And then I'll just click run. Time generated greater than 7 days. I should have taken a closer look. We may not get anything back. I don't think I did this 7 days ago. Oh, while we're waiting for that, we will change it. We'll say give me the top. I'm gonna hit cancel, hit run again. You know what, probably limit 5. Oh, okay, so we got our 5 records. Not sure why I didn't just show it. So there they are. So, you know, you got that. You can look at it as a chart. And there's a lot of things you can do with KQL. And this is specifically against those logs. Let's take a look at the workbooks. I don't want to save any changes. So basically, I can always paste that into the dashboard too, or pin it to the dashboard. And these workbooks will give us more information. Let's say, maybe, oh, you know, all right, so we'll click on this. You know, I accidentally, or maybe I have it after monitoring, is policies. All right, so if I had something interesting to see, we see it here, but I don't. But so monitoring is fairly easy to enable, and then it obviously takes a little investigation to find out what might be important in your specific case. So what I want to do is go to policies. And not sure why I skipped that. I don't even see slides for it. All right, fair enough. Let's look at policies. So one thing to note is policies. Well, we'll see with policies. So right now we have these 2 policies that say I'm in 100% compliance, but how do I apply a policy? I can just go to Azure policy. And the same for monitoring. I could have gone to Azure monitoring. It's really the same thing as if I drill down into the Azure Arc and then Kubernetes and then monitoring. You can go the other way too. So now I'm in a policy. Let's go to definitions. So you can define your own policies. In this case, we'll just find one and apply it. So you have built-in or custom. So you can create your own or built-in. All mine are basically built-in right now, so it doesn't matter if we filter it and get the same result. Categories. I don't want to see everything. I just want to see maybe something related to Kubernetes. Here we are. I do have a test one. Interesting. So here, Kubernetes cluster pod security baseline standards for Linux-based workloads. I don't really know what it is, but let's click on it. So one of the things you want to do is like anything specific, you want to research it. Hey, I want to look at all the policies for Kubernetes. What are they trying to force? What are they after? And so forth. So we have this policy here. I'm going to say assign. So you basically find a policy you want, or you create your own, and then we're going to assign it. We'll choose a scope. A scope is going to be at what level it's going to be applied at, and then everything below that. So I'm clicking the ellipse on the right. And if you have more than one subscription, you can obviously go there. So I'm saying my example subscription. I don't want to apply to everything in the subscription. I only want it to apply to the clusters that are managed by Azure Arc. In this case, I have them all in the same resource group, which makes it handy. We call it arc-rg. I'm going to say select. So this will apply to all those clusters in there. You can exclude. So let's say in that resource group, I have a cluster in there I don't want it to be applied to. I could exclude it here. And okay, we can enforce it. So I'm going to say review and create. Or I'm sorry, let's go to next. And so this is important. So when you first apply a policy, I mean, I recommend always audit it first. So then you will see what effects it will have without it actually making any change, without it enforcing anything, because we're enforcing business rules here. So once you're happy with it, then you can update it to deny. So we're going to say audit. Say review and create. I'm going to say create. So I'm just trying to keep it very simple, how you can just very quickly not really know what the policy does, and we can just apply it and then have it audit. So now, if I was going to go back to the clusters that are under Azure Arc, and then I'll go to my k8s cluster. I will go down to policies. And so this is a policy I just applied. It says not started yet. So there is a polling for it, and then it will run. It may take some time, and then it'll say either 100. In this case, I have 3 different clusters. So, either 100%, 60%, 30%. It'll report on that. And that's how you apply a policy. So it's actually quite easy. I really encourage you. You can do that on, I think, almost any resource. Try to go to policies, look up tags, and try to enforce a specific tag. So in summary, Azure Arc allows you to manage. You can governance through policy. You can apply security through policy. You can manage different things, Kubernetes, servers, data services. Other things can consider is Azure Centennial. So that's also a multi-cloud on-prem management tool that allows you to basically, you collect logs from all of your different resources, and you can mine those logs to see where a risk that might otherwise not be noticed because of noise. Let's say somebody's gone in and tried to log on to one of your servers and they were unsuccessful. But let's say they went to all 30 of your servers and was unsuccessful. Well, you would notice one login attempt and like, oh, that's no big deal. But the same IP address just hit all 30 of your servers doing that. So then Azure Centennial will help you see that so you can mitigate it before it becomes a real problem. And any questions? Oh, what the Azure Arc Jumpstart? This is a great website. I think it's by a Microsoft guy. Well, let's just go to it real quick. Let's see. So I'm having a little trouble clicking on it. All right, I'll just type it in. So this is a bunch of quick starts for Azure Arc, and there's also subsections specifically for Azure Arc enable Kubernetes. And like I said, any CNF compliant Kubernetes cluster should work. So you see he has, Rancher, k8s. I don't see Minikube here yet, but that would probably work, I would think. We look at AKS, Terraform, if you're familiar with that, you can use that to deploy it, or ARM. I personally think for testing, it might be easier to just go to a portal, create it real quick, and then you're going to register the namespaces and use the AZ connect k8s command, and you're really done from that point. So any questions?
I don't see any questions. Quite a bunch tonight.
That's a quiet night.
I have a question, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious if the roadmap for this, so obviously you talked about Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is a popular framework across Azure and competing clouds and in other circumstances like on-prem and such. Is Arc, the vision for Arc to bring together all management experiences for all compute and other kinds of workloads everywhere? Is this like the grand one pane of glass?
So I believe for, so it's sort of a little bit different. So it's to bring the management of all resources outside of Azure to a single pane of glass. So you don't necessarily, I know I showed AKS here, but you wouldn't really do that procedure because it'd be unnecessary. But I think their marching orders or initiative is to be able to manage everything outside. So basically, I didn't actually talk about this, but if you notice, I didn't talk about having to configure firewall rules or anything. How did I get into EKS or GKE? Basically, it installs an agent and it goes out to the Azure space. So it eliminates that. So there's a, inside your cluster, you will see a namespace for Azure Arc with those agents running. And that'd be the same thing for any servers or anything. So if you think about how Microsoft manages it anyway, it's going to be an agent on your VM, and it's going to talk to Azure. And with that concept, you can really manage a lot of stuff.
Thanks for that. And a follow-up question. I know you mentioned Azure Sentinel, which is a security service. Were you mentioning that as another, you did mention it's another service that can help you keep an eye on not just Azure, but non-Azure resources. Did you mention, or can you clarify if Azure Arc has a role with Azure Sentinel used in that manner?
So they're independent, but they sort of work in the same way. So you will, instead of an agent talking on a VM remotely to Azure, you are shipping your logs or streaming your logs externally into a analytic workspace. And from there, Azure Sentinel will mine the data.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. All right, well, I think that is it for questions. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to, let's see. I'll do the stop presenting.
Yeah, everybody, I'd like to, join me in thanking Mr. Daniel Gallone for this insightful walk through Azure Arc and how to get it to do your Kubernetes biddings, no matter where your Kubernetes bits are. And thank you, Dan. Excellent talk as always. For anybody who wants to revisit this, we'll have the video posted up on the YouTube channel within usually within a day. And the YouTube channel Jason, can you mention is the YouTube channel now available at a new URL because we hit the 100?
Not yet, but it will be.
Okay, so you can for now you can find this talk in a day or so at bit.ly/Azure YouTube, and stay tuned on either the North Boston Azure or the Boston Azure meetup sites for further events that are being planned. And I will just ask one time if there are any further announcements from anybody before we close it down. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Dan, for presenting, and we'll see you all next time.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Bye.